right, good evening. Welcome to UPARS Los Angeles. My name is Steve Murillo. I am the director for UPARS LA. This is July 2018, and we have a wonderful guest. We haven't had Paola Harris here in many, many years, and she's long overdue, so I'm glad she's here. She is also a widely published freelance writer, especially in Europe. She has studied extraterrestrial-related phenomena since 1979 and is on personal terms with many of the leading researchers in the field. From 1980 to 1986, she assisted Dr. J. Allen Hynek with his UFO investigations and has interviewed many top military witnesses concerning their involvement in the government truth embargo. Because of her international perspective on extraterrestrial-related phenomena, Paola has consulted with many researchers about the best avenues for planetary disclosure, with emphasis on the big picture and stressing historical connection. She's a close friend of Monsignor Padre Corrado Balducci and assisted in filming the Italian witnesses, including the Monsignor, for the Disclosure Project for the May 9, 2001 press conference. Her new nonprofit association, Starworks Italia, will continue to bring speakers to Italy and promote disclosure and exopolitics dialogue worldwide. She has a regular column in Area 51 UFO magazine, has written for Nexus Australia, Noticiario UFO, and Dossier Alieni, among other publications. Paola lives in Rome and Boulder, but mostly in Boulder, Colorado, and has a master's degree in education. She teaches history and photojournalism and online classes in exopolitics for Dr. Michael Sala's Exopolitics Institute, for which she is the International Liaison Director. If you would, put your hands together and give a warm welcome to Paola Harris.
I have a lot to share with you tonight, but because I'm a teacher, I'm going to sound like a teacher. I have a master's in education. I've taught high school English for 30 years. And from 1992 until 2007, when I moved back to Boulder, Colorado, I taught at the American Overseas School of Rome, private school. However, let me add something to what Steve just said. I remember when I was working with Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and I was really nuts and bolts, and I was afraid to look at what was inside the craft, and I didn't want to deal with anything weird, and I really wanted to stay with putting pins in a map. That was my thing. I thought, don't go any farther than that. And he said to me, you know, Paula, he said, one of the things you must understand, he said, that this phenomenon is connected with the paranormal, and never throw the baby out with the bathwater. So he was my teacher. I mean, he was the best he's the godfather of ufology. I want to add something else. Tonight's lecture is going to be, I'm going to sound like a teacher, and I have the list of books, and I'm going back to the future because I'm very, very interested in the visitations, especially in Southern California of the 50s and 60s, of space people walking off ships. And I wanted to, before I start talking about this, one of the people that influenced me the most, because in my bio, and by the way, it's Starworks USA now, is mentioned that I'm very close to a lot of people, and we are very honored tonight to have the actual creator, producer, director of the movie Roswell, Paul Davids, with us. Paul, stand up. You must have seen the movie Roswell. And he's here with his wife, Hollis. And Hollis, God bless you, because not a lot of my friends, their significant others, are not interested in this subject matter, and it's very difficult to get them to. And you notice I'm alone, so it's very difficult to get them to really understand. I saw the movie Roswell, with Lyle McLaughlin and Sheen, right? And it just is so, I didn't know when I saw that movie with Martin Sheen and Lyle McLaughlin that I would get to meet Jesse Marcel Jr., bring him to Italy, have him in my apartment in Rome. Jesse Marcel Jr., of course, for people who know this field, was the 9-year-old boy that actually saw the pieces, because his father did not bring home pieces of any kind of weather balloon to show his family. Is that logical? And so that Jesse Marcel Jr. explained to me exactly what happened that very famous night. And when I talk about these things, just know that, look, this is the history of planet Earth. This is not ufology. This stuff happened. It's part of history. It should be in a history book. So why are we now just, playing this game of UFOs and do you believe and all this ridiculousness, that we're way past that, because these things did happen. And that's what actually the On Stellar Award says, because what they did is clips of my saying that this is data, this is not some kind of science fiction. We've collected so much data, we don't need to play the game, are they real? The next question, and I agree with, the next question is, and all my books, all my 5 books are military and intelligence people that talked about this. Colonel Philip Corso in the Pentagon that got the actual, I'm not talking about him tonight, but I was a journalist that spent the most time with him. I brought him to Italy, that talked about his having the Roswell artifacts and going to big corporations and back engineering these artifacts. So they were already working in that area. The secret is secret, not because everybody's afraid of UFOs or they're afraid of aliens. The secret is a secret because it's a money deal. This is an economy. You think that in 1945, and I've done the 1945 crash near San Antonio, New Mexico in 1947, Roswell, Aztec, those other crashes, those beings were on vacation. They were very interested in our nuclear capabilities. We had radar that was mobile, and they brought these craft down, and you think that the recoveries are going to say, let's throw all this in the trash 70 years ago? No, they didn't throw it in the trash. They back engineered it. And one of the problems is that, and I'm not going to go into it now, but I'm very passionate about this kind of making of the ufology study, because I'm a teacher, serious. It is not a joke. It is not entertainment. We really shouldn't be wearing little t-shirts. And this should be studied in major universities. So I'm going to cover a historical angle. And when I cover what I cover, because a lot of it is in this area, I want you to understand this really did happen. Most of my colleagues and most of the people that study ufology do not go back to the 50s and 60s. Because if they did, they'd be shocked at what happened in this area. And I have this sheet because it's on a timeline. Now, have I done all the work? Yes. The way that I do the work, though, is I have to do it in person. I don't do anything on the telephone. I do an awful lot of traveling, and it's not sponsored by anybody. So my kids, at my age, and by the way, I'm 73. Yes. are going, Mom, why didn't you go to the Caribbean and sit on the beach? You deserve it. You should be retired. How can I retire? This is the most important question for humanity. Not only that, but I do a lot of traveling in the research that I do, and I need to get this seriously considered. My dream would be to have a university class where everybody discusses it, and you have a think tank with intelligent people, and there's no more playing around, because it's really important. Now, after that very serious beginning, let me, if I could figure this out now, I hope I got this right. Let's see. This is, I studied a lot, and thanks to Paul Davids, I studied a lot about, because he was involved with some of the Star Wars work and so forth. I studied a lot about the people that really brought this forth. Gene Roddenberry's vision is the vision we should have for the United States today. If man is to survive, he will have learned to take delight in the essential differences between men and between culture. Gene Roddenberry, do you see diversity on Star Trek? Are they all the same? No. This is a vision, and guess who really believes in this vision? The young people. If you go to a Star Trek convention, you see 3,000 people. You go to a UFO convention, you see 60 or 70 people, and they're usually over the age of 50. So what do we need to do to bring the young people into this? This vision of Star Trek, and by the way, I believe that if you study the life of Gene Roddenberry, it's very interesting. He's very involved with Andrea Polharich and Phyllis Schlemmer. In Phyllis Schlemmer's book, for you people that know anything about her, The Only Planet of Choice, there is 2 chapters where Gene is channeling the Council of Nine, asking, Deep Space Nine? He's asking for kinds of information that only comes from the cosmos. And his putting together this vision of diversity and this vision attracted a lot of young people. So I think we have a lot to learn from him. Exopolitica, I changed from ufology to exopolitics because I saw that exopolitics was stuck with sightings. And I wanted to do a more educational version. And for me, exopolitics also took into consideration the psychological, the social implications of contact. We've already had contact, but do you know what that means for this planet? What has to change? Like the beautiful person, John Mack, Dr. John Mack told me, and I was his interpreter in Florence in a conference just 4 months before he died. He gave a passionate talk about changing our worldview. He said, if you don't change your worldview to accommodate this, we will become, he called us the virus of the universe. And Dr. John Mack was one of those people that I had really interesting conversations with, but then he was a Harvard University professor who really risked his career to talk about the truth. So I think exopolitics was a better name for it than ufology, because I feel I'm a journalist and more of a person who looks at the educational part of it. This isn't working, but I just received the Stellar Citizen Award in front of 1,400 people in Manchester, England, because I gave, and it was really hard because I said, I'm a woman. I said, this is a male-dominated field, and you're giving the award to me. And they said, yeah, because you inspire us. And I was really, really happy. And I thought, wow, this age. And so the video is incredible. It's on my Facebook if you want to see it, because it was done with all of my quotes about how to take this subject seriously. I really am Italian. I was born in Rome. 1945, my dad was the Italian consul for the state of Rhode Island. That's one of my pictures. I used to live next to the Colosseum, so I'm very, very international. That was me a long time ago. The awakening of consciousness is the most evolutionary step in mankind. I learned through a long, long process, because I'm really nuts and bolts. I mean, it takes a lot for me to believe things. That really what these visitations are about are the awakening of our consciousness and the hope that humanity grows up. That's the bottom line. You can go play around and all the other stuff, but that is exactly why these beings are here. And my books are in English, Spanish, and Italian. I have a Spanish version of Colonel Corso's book in the back. My latest book is Conversations with Colonel Corso. It's on Amazon. It's all audio tape. I had a tape recorder in my pocket with the whole time I spent with Corso in Italy. And he told me a great deal about the workings of how this back engineering came about. And his was in the 1960s during the Kennedy administration. These are so I don't talk much about my books because I don't know what it is, but people aren't reading anymore. And I always tell people, if you were in my class right now and I made you do a 250 page research paper, which I used to do, and you gave me internet research and didn't go to the source, I'd give you an F right away. You have to take source material. The answers are not on internet gossip. You must read the people that wrote the books. If Hynek said something, read Hynek's book. If Einstein was talking about a concept, you're not going to go to talk to somebody who knew him, and knew his family. You're going to go to the source material, what that person actually said. So I'm going to present you tonight with source material. This book is the book that's going to have the Latin contactees, and those are the ones you're going to be interested in. Okay, this is Conversations with Colonel Corso in Spanish. This isn't. Okay, I write now for X Times. Dossier Alieni and Noticiario UFO have been changed to X Times. There is no magazine in America. I can't put my work anywhere. These are serious magazines like People magazine. You can get them on the newsstands. So this is in Europe. These are the other books. Oh, my conference. Okay, let me go backwards here. there was a promo for Laughlin that's not going to come out because the videos are not coming out. However, what happened was that I came back to the United States in 2007, and I found that conferences for me were really based too much on conspiracy theory and fear. So my thoughts were, okay, maybe they don't know about other countries. So this is the 5th year that I brought Laughlin Conference back. It was originally Bob Brown's. I used to drag Bob Brown every year. Last year he was there with me. And what happens there is I can try to change the focus from only fear into inspiration. We have enough data. But when you bring in material from international countries, things that are happening, for instance, did you know if you watched a particular show on a new internet news show that was on, that the airport in China was closed again because of UFOs? And that was last week. And then they have the film, and I'm watching this. I knew that in 2009, the Bremen airport in Germany was closed by UFOs, so they had to close the airport in Germany, and I got it only through a soccer magazine because the soccer team that was playing soccer that day watched the UFO. This is coming out of other countries. That's major for people that think we're not having sightings. Okay, so Laughlin is November 2nd through 4th. The theme is the Return of the Star People, which is basically Native American. The Return of the Star People, for me, I have a theme every year. So what the Return of the Star People is the Native American and the indigenous people that believe their people came from the stars. Do you know how many cultures believe their people came from the stars? You know, even in Close Encounters. That is not Devil's Tower. That is really called Bear Mountain. It is a Native American name, Bear Mountain. The white people changed it to Devil's Tower, and the scratches on the side are because Bear was chasing the 7 sisters, which are the Pleiades, and Spielberg knew that. He knew what the real truth behind Devil's Tower was. That's why he filmed that there, which is basically the Holloman Air Force Base story of the planned landing, which really did happen. And if you want to see a little clip of that landing, try to get the film. You can see it on internet called It Has Begun. And there is a 30-second clip of the UFO coming down at Holloman. So, I mean, if you do enough research in this field, you know we get little snippets from Hollywood, we get little snippets from place. So let's go back to the past. There's all the different types of UFOs. And there's Alan Hynek, and there's a young Paola Harris standing next to him. And how did I meet him? Because by accident, by coincidence, and that's how my whole life has been, I happened to go to a wedding in Evanston, Illinois. After I saw Close Encounters, I thought I'd walk into the Center for UFO Studies, CUFOS. I thought he'd never be there in a million years, but he was, and he heard that I had an Italian background. He walked around from the corner and with his pipe, you know, famous Alan Hynek pipe. He said, "Would you work with me?" And I said, "Absolutely." He said, "I'm going to give you all my sightings from Italy." He said, "And I want you to translate them for me." And I said, "Absolutely, I'd be glad to." So for 6 years, I'm working with someone who was part of Project Blue Book, who's an astronomer who knows the difference between a UFO and a star and is reminding me of that. And I'm asking myself now at this age, how in the world did that become my first teacher? How did he become my first mentor? And of course, these people are no longer with us, but they really are in my heart. Here's Alan thanking me for dinner. He'd come to Boulder to visit several times, and since he didn't drive very much, I used to drive him to his appointments at the university and so forth. There's my CUFOS card, and signed by him. And I love this picture of Alan Hynek, because this is the picture of really what we're into. Look at that little boy looking at him. It really is touching to see young people, you know, and here he is, this very distinguished professor. And by the way, at that table is a very young Sanford, and I think it's J.J. Hurtak who's sitting there. J.J. Hurtak is the one on the end. No, I think it's Ray Sanford. It's Ray Sanford, I think. I can't read it from here. But there's Hurtak sitting there. Now, okay, I've had to stretch my mind from the nuts and bolts, because Alan Hynek was the one that said close encounters of the third kind. First kind is sightings, second kind is physical traces cases, third kind is contact. I didn't want to go past a certain, because my mind couldn't wrap around it at the time in the 1970s and 80s. Now I've had to go to contact. I've been dragged there. And so I am the consultant on 2 films that Stephen Greer did, Serious and Unacknowledged. If you look at those 2 films, my name is there because of the whistleblowers and the insiders that I interviewed. And now I also am, so I'm involved with Stephen's, I've been on expeditions with Stephen. I've seen craft, I mean, it is common. Especially with their night screening. Here is Monte Perdido in Spain. I was there last year with Ricardo Gonzalez. I've seen craft. It's a common occurrence, okay? If you, in these 2 cases, there is a preparation. In Stephen's case, there's a puja ceremony where he recites Sanskrit. In Ricardo's case, there's about an hour and a half of steady meditation and mantras. So, this is kind of my hero, contact. And I'm going to share something with you. Alan told me that Carl Sagan said to him, "Why are you going on stage talking about UFOs?" And Carl Sagan had seen the Blue Book files. He says, "You ruin your reputation," and he says, "You don't get your grants." Because Carl worked at Cornell. But just before he died, he made the movie Contact. I teach a course called Hollywood and Disclosure. There is so much in these films that you can get about the real story. The idea of you think after all these years that SETI hasn't got a signal? What happens if they get one? Then it's over. I mean, people have to start using logic. This is who really is visiting Earth. This is who visited Earth in the 50s and 60s. This is a human child. This is a human child. This is an extraterrestrial child, part of the Maurizio Cavallo Polaroids that he gave me. Maurizio Cavallo lives in Vercelli in northern Italy, in the French Alps. He was allowed to go aboard the ship and take Polaroids. This little girl not only has a blue cast, but her ear is down to here. So Maurizio allowed me as a journalist, and I had a hard time with this story. I went to meet him. I wasn't convinced. I went 3 times. This is going to really surprise you. The 3rd time I said to him, "I don't know if I want to do your story." He hadn't showed me the photos yet. He said, "Paula, I have to tell you something." He said, "My chief contact, Swell," and you'll see the picture of Swell, who's a young man, works in a bank here in Rome. He's not from here. He's from Clarion, where this little girl is. And they said 10 years ago, there will be an American journalist who will come and see you, Maurizio. You let her see the photos, and we call her the bridge. So he let me in the house, and he showed me the photos, and you will see the pictures tonight, okay? This is the problem with the Earth. We had reached a place on a timeline in 1945 where we had changed our reality, and it interested a lot of cultures. It interested the whole entire cosmos. When this happened at Trinity Site, and it's very important that you understand that these people aren't coming here on vacation. They are coming here for a purpose. When this happened, a lot of things happened in New Mexico. I asked Clifford Stone, whose book I published. I have one of his books in the back. I said, "Clifford, Colonel Corso told me that there were 52 different races categorized in the Pentagon. And Clifford says, no, they're actually 57. I said, what do you mean? He said, I had a manual when I did crash recovery where every page had a drawing of a being because we had to know how we had to give him first aid or how we would kill it. I said, you actually saw a manual? You had it in your hand, 57 different species? But look at our field, reptilians, grays, Nordics, that's it. We shove them in 3 boxes, and we don't even bother to look at the different cultures from the cosmos that come here. What would you call the Virginia, Brazil case? That little being had a reddish skin with 3 protuberances. He is not a gray, and he's certainly not a Nordic, and he's not a reptilian. And all Nordics are not the same. We tend to go around with t-shirts, gadgets, and so forth in a very, very serious situation here where we're having visitations. And even though they categorize 57 different species, we have a lot of different species that are currently visiting that are not in those 3 categories. What interested me was this. Because I've been covering the 1945 crash case, and I'm not talking about it tonight because it's too long. It's 7 years I've worked on this. But I've been down to Trinity site, and just this plaque that Robert Oppenheimer wrote about, he says we have, entered the nuclear age. And Oppenheimer, who lost his security clearance, said, I am death, the killer of worlds, plural. Killer of worlds, plural, from the Bhagavad Gita. You think we're not in the same boat that we were in the 50s with North Korea, with everybody that has these nuclear capabilities? You think we're not, did we solve anything? I think that what's happening is we're still being observed to see exactly what road we're going to take. And it's really, so I had to go back to the giant rock days. Okay, so giant rock days are all these people. And maybe you've already known about these people because you're not so far away from Joshua Tree, from Giant Rock, from that area in Southern California. But in Southern California, 1953, 1952, and if you want the actual source, go to YouTube and hear George Van Tassel talk about the spaceman that came off the runway that he had rented down in Landers, California, walked into his little shack, his little place where his wife and he and his family had rented underneath Giant Rock, because George Van Tassel worked for Douglas Aircraft, and he rented the runway, and the craft really did land. And the spaceman really did go in and say he was from Venus. And he did give him a message. And he did tell him to build the Integratron, which is supposed to be a rejuvenation chamber. But if you go to the YouTube video, you'll find out that it was supposed to be a time machine, that it had Tesla coils around the middle that have been taken off now because it's now a sound bath device, because 2 ladies bought it and now you can go there for sound baths. It means that it's like a meditation device. But the story of George Van Tassel fascinated me, so I decided that I was going to grab everybody that was alive from the 1950s and go back there and have them tell the story and put them on film, which is what I did. George Van Tassel is no longer alive, but his family is. So I talked to them about the Space Brothers, because in those days it was called Space Brother Movement. And they told me, we still see the ships. And yes, George had communication with them. And the Integratron was funded by Howard Hughes. So in those days, in the 50s, you think they took this seriously? If Howard Hughes is funding the Integratron, here is some more, and actually, there are books that Van Tassel wrote. Here's the Council of Seven Veils. Here are the gentlemen, and I'm going to talk about them individually, that were part of the Giant Rock group. There's the Integratron. By the way, there's no nails in the integratron. It is done, I think, just put together. And the thing that's amazing was these people, not only, and they said they came from Venus, so I have to give you that. They said they came from Venus. I have to accept that because if Howard Menger, George Adamski, Eugenio Siracusa, and George Van Tassel said they came from Venus, that's what it was. So does Venus have life on it? Who really knows? But in any case, this is the Van Tassel story. He died before it was completed. And that whole area in Landers, California, which is where Contact in the Desert was, is very, very interesting. If you've done the tours with Barbara Harris, she'll go into details about what was happening there. Their conferences had thousands of people. They had sightings. All the people of the world came together. Why I'm showing you this particular book, and if you want to write it down, I suggest you do, because Orfeo Angelucci worked for Lockheed Martin here in Burbank. He met with a human space brother under the Halpernian Bridge, 1953, a man, and he tells you the streets in Burbank, where he lived, how he was called, and what the message was. And the message was, and I have it here because I have the page, an explanation of the relationship these beings have to planet Earth. And it's here in Burbank. And it happened in 53. And this book is amazing. I started to read this book. I read it one day and I said, so tomorrow, guess what I'm doing? I'm going to that exact same spot where he met this man. I'm here. I want to know. Do you think somebody knows I'm going to that spot? You think somebody's watching? Yes. Because what I'm doing tonight is going backwards to the future. This happened. Now, here's a gentleman, if you study Angelucci, it's really interesting because he basically was from Trenton, New Jersey. He didn't like the thunderstorms there, so he moved to Burbank. He worked for Lockheed Martin, very serious man, and guess what? He gets contacted just like Van Tassel. Ironically, Douglas Aircraft, right? Here's Angelucci. So he called his, I'm trying to read it, but he called his contact Neptune, who gave him many messages dealing with our use of nuclear power and the misuse of our technologies, similar to Adamski in his books. So Angelucci was part of that giant rock crowd. I ended up reading all the books of all those guys that were contactees back then, because there's Angelucci. And there's certain pages that I had to highlight. The messages are so powerful, it's unbelievable. If you are interested in what happened here in Burbank, please get that book. It's still online. The White Sands incident, Daniel Fry, everybody knows from back then, everybody knows the story. I mean, Daniel Fry, physicist, White Sands, craft lands, nobody's in it. He's told, a voice tells him to get in it. He goes to New York in a matter of minutes. And then when he comes back, he doesn't understand the propulsion because he doesn't feel anything. A lot of these people that are taking, and by the way, a physicist from White Sands, this is not just anybody off the street. These beings wanted to give a real message. And what they told Daniel Fry was, we have this technology we can share with you if you use it responsibly. But what did Daniel Fry do? He looked at the consciousness message, started a group called Understanding in Tucson, Arizona. Remember Star Trek? Understanding, in other words, understanding the idea of people coming together, the cosmos. Howard Menger, for me, was the most spectacular. When I read that book, it changed my life. Howard Menger, High Bridge, New Jersey. Howard Menger, when he was 10 years old, met a beautiful woman who was sitting in the rock behind his home, and she said, Howard, we've been watching you. We will contact you later on, and they did. Howard Mentor has not only movies, he has photographs, and I'm going to show you some of them because these come from the Wendell Stevens archive, which is very, very exclusive. Howard Mentor also was at Giant Rock, so you see Giant Rock here. Howard Mentor, High Bridge, New Jersey, 1957. People from Venus gave him samples of fruits and vegetables to examine. In the Wendell Stevens archive, I have the addresses of the laboratories those fruits and vegetables went to. They were real. They were really given to Howard. The last 30 pages of his book, From Outer Space to You, and you'll see the cover in a minute, tell you that, because Howard was one of those people that was really close to these Venusians who said, like they told Van Tassel, you don't live long enough, you people die too early. So the last 30 pages From Outer Space to You tells you to keep your blood alkaline, because most diseases have to do with blood that is over acid, including this is cancer. And they tell you how to keep your, the last 30 pages of how to eat, what kind of soil we should be growing. So they gave these things, and so they gave Howard these fruits and vegetables. You'll see them in a minute. Photos of Val Thorne, okay. So there's the book, From Outer Space to You. This book is so detailed in Howard Mentor's contacts in High Bridge. This is the last thing that I haven't done. I have not gone to New Jersey to this property, because when Howard Mentor saw the craft land, who was with him was the FBI. They knew, because Howard Mentor ended up working in Colorado Springs. These beings from Venus gave him a propulsion machine. Howard built a UFO, a small one that went over 2 states, and the intelligence community didn't like that. And when they found out he had the free energy, by the way, which is the most dangerous part of all this, they asked him to work for him. So, Howard Mentor really, really went through a lot with the government, with fans that would, what's her name? His wife, Connie, was still alive. She said, I don't want to talk about UFOs because everybody comes and camps in our yard and wants us to heal them and everything. What happens, unfortunately, you know this is going to happen. If beings come walking in here that have these powers, we make a religion out of it. Make them gods, just like they did in the old days. And this happened to Howard Mentor and his wife, and they basically, the government asked Howard to decline his story in the name of national security. And I will tell you what Howard did in the end, but the other book is Out of the Stars by Robert Short, and I'll talk about Robert Short in a minute. This is Howard Mentor, a young Howard Mentor. Remember, High Bridge, New Jersey. Here's Howard and Connie. Connie, I called her. I couldn't get over there to interview her because she was one of the last survivors. She lived in Vero Beach, Florida. I wanted to know about Giant Rock. I wanted to know about the contacts. I wanted to know about all the details. This is Howard Mentor. Also, these are the photographs of Howard Mentor, which are in his books. These beings would come from out of the ships, but they wouldn't walk out, they'd appear. And he's got an energy machine in his hand. He's got rocks in his hand. And on the bottom, I don't know if you can see this because the lights are too heavy, but that's a photograph of Howard Mentor Connie with his arm around one of the Venusians. Howard Mentor's contacts look like the same as Eugenio Siracusa. Remember the name Eugenio Siracusa because I'm going to go there in Italy. He lived on the island of Sicily. He had the same kind of contacts at the same time. So Howard was asked to bring clothes and cut their hair. There wasn't the hippie days, and these people had long blonde hair. So he did. He gave them clothes so they could blend in. Remember I told you Maurizio Cavallo said that Swell worked in a bank? Well, the more research I began to find out that they take turns working among us, which I couldn't, even wrap my head around. But I asked Timothy Good, who I consider the best researcher in the world because he's a field researcher. I said, Timothy, did you ever meet an ET? He goes, yes, in New York City. I said, when? He said, I was sitting in a hotel lobby. He said, this man came in a 3-piece suit. He sat opposite me. He was reading the newspaper. And telepathically, I said, if you are not from here, take your right index finger and put it on the left side of your nose. And he did that. I said, what happened, Timothy? And he said, I was just so shocked. He said, the guy then folded his newspaper and walked out the hotel door, the hotel lobby. I said, he wasn't from here. He said, no, he wasn't from here. I said to Colin Andrews, did you ever meet an ET? Colin Andrews lives in Connecticut, as you know, he's a crop circle researcher. He said, yes, Paul, one time my wife and I went into a cafe and I heard in my head, I am coming into the cafe, you will see me. And he said, this beautiful woman in a bicycle, put her bicycle on the outside of the cafe, came in. She was stunning. He said she went to sit in a corner. He stood, he sat with his wife. He looked over and he knew she wasn't from here. And she looked straight at him and he was too afraid to go over and talk to her. If you've read Ingo Swann's book, Penetration, and I believe Ingo Swann, he worked for the CIA, the last chapter, he's talking about this woman in a supermarket in California looking over the fruit, and he knows she's not from here because he's looking straight at her. Ingo was an incredible psychic. He said the hairs on his arm arose, and he said, I walked over to her and I was stopped by 2 CIA guards who said, don't touch her because we're keeping her under observation. So are they here? Yes. Are they among us? Yes. These are just 3 stories from 3 credible people. So these are from the Wendell Stevens archive. These are black and white photos. Those 2 beings are from Venus. They don't come out on the film because they've got lights around them. They basically come out as light beings. There's Howard. I hope you can see a bit bigger photo with Connie, and he's got his arm around one of them, and that's how they come out on the Kodak film. I saw the original pictures. I had to, I shared them with the person that bought the Wendell Stevens archive, and he gave them to me because he gave me permission to scan them. Because it's very important that you know that these were human-type beings in the Highbridge, New Jersey orchard of Howard Menger. And also that was the piece of fruit on the top, and there's a moon rock that were given. Howard Menger's story is amazing. None of my colleagues even mention him. And there's artifacts here. I have the actual addresses and the actual envelopes he put that in. And I haven't gone to New Jersey to check this all out yet because I would love to do this. But the most important thing, Howard Menger, who had to deny his story for national security reasons, is standing in front of Edward Condon Committee Report, University of Colorado, 1969, showing his book to Condon. And he's with his wife, so if it isn't true, what's he doing with Condon? What's he doing at the university? That was the whitewash, the Condon Committee report. There's Howard Menger trying to bring forth the truth. This is the real shocker, okay? This is Howard Menger's orchard. You know, when contactees in those days, 50s and 60s, you see the dresses. They're sitting in the orchard, they're talking, they're giving their lectures about what their messages are. There is Howard in dark glasses. I don't know if you see him. I don't have a pointer, but he's way over to the left. But there's 3 strange people sitting there. I want to go to this place so badly because I want to see what happened. Stranger in the Pentagon, Frank Strangest, you heard. The Val Thor story, right? These people are sitting in Howard Menger's orchard. They are, there they are. But the thing that's amazing, in Wendell Stevens' archive, there's a letter from the photographer. And there's also an audio tape where the photographer Augie Roberts, and he's very famous for you people that know the old timers, August Roberts says, you know, Menger said for me to come because he's going to give this lecture, and there were 3 people there that were not from this planet, and I didn't know who they were, so I had to take pictures of everybody. And he said, when I saw these 3, they were overdressed for the, being out in the orchard, and that's the letter. I've got a copy of the letter. And I also have the audio tape. And he goes, and they knew I was taking pictures of them. And there they are. That's Val, Thor, Jill, and Don at Highbridge, New Jersey, in the orchard. And there's other pictures because they're here too. Look at how everybody's just casual. And these three are sitting there. I mean, it's like if we're giving a lecture and there's two ETs here tonight and we don't know who they are. This is a reality. And there's good old Val Thor with Don and Jill. Somebody says, well, Jill's too gorgeous. Well, if you have another culture where you can put a consciousness in a body, aren't you going to pick a gorgeous body? You think they're going to do the regular thing we do here? I mean, I'm sure they can actually clone people. In that note that Val Thor is writing, we are all related, we are one, we share one God. Now, if you read Stranger in the Pentagon, and I had to do that, there is a map that shows where Victor 1, the ship is, the massive ship, parked over Lake Mead. So I went there. I went to Lake Mead. There's an X where it was cloaked. I didn't believe it was still there, but to me that area was really weird. And there, if you read Stranger in the Pentagon, you see he showed a map where that Victor 1 ship was, and that's where it was, where I'm standing right there. So let's go to Giant Rock. We go back to Giant Rock. And so I say, well, the only person left, I can't get them all because they all died. Isn't this a shame that nobody did research before they all died? And you can't get them? Is Robert Short, and he lives in Cornville near Sedona, Arizona. So I said, okay, I gotta grab Robert Short and his wife and take them back to the old days. And this is the story that Robert Short told me. This is the story he told me, which is the story of the 1950s in that area. He said basically he was driving down from Hollywood, from Burbank. He was going to Southern California near Palm Springs. And all at once, he said he saw a craft. He said it was a scout type ship, and it landed on the side of the highway, and he stopped his car. And if you want to hear his actual testimony, which is what you should do, go to my YouTube channel, because there's 3 different interviews I did with him in Cornville, and you can see how terrified he is when he relives it. He said, out of the craft came a spaceman dressed like Michael Rennie of The Day the Earth Stood Still. He said the spaceman walked over to him and said, we've been watching you, and you'll hear from us. So Robert Short was shocked. You can see when he's telling me, he's so upset because he's still reliving it. And he said in those days, those people that got these messages like Van Tassel, he said he ended up going to see Van Tassel, would communicate with these beings on shortwave radio. Remember that I said shortwave radio. Well, what happened is in that particular frequency, the FBI found out about it. And you'll see on the YouTube channel interview, Robert Short is being told, you talk to these people again, we're gonna send you to Leavenworth. So he's going, I don't wanna go to Leavenworth. This is happening in the 1950s. So the being said to him, okay, since we can't do this way, can you lend us your vocal cords? So what did Robert Short do? He went down to Giant Rock during those conventions. He completely relaxed, allowed his vocal cords to have the voice of Corton, who was the guy that he was involved with, come out of his voice, come out of his, his throat. So what I thought was, I said, okay, Robert, how long has it been since you've channeled down at Giant Rock? And he said, not for a long, long time. I said, I'm going to bring you back there. I want you to go back with me. I said, we're going to take you back and we're going to have you do a channeling, and here we are, because we're getting ready to film the channeling. Here we are at Giant Rock. Here he is sitting in the chair. He has a mask over his eyes. He's sitting. All at once he loses consciousness and this very weird voice comes out. And this channeling in 2014 mentions Vladimir Putin. And I am in shock because he wasn't even in the news then. And this channeling is called The End of Separation. And you can read it there. And I can give it to anybody that writes to me. And we have it on film. And it is the beings telling us what's going to happen. And this happened in 2014. So my first Laughlin conference, I had Robert Short there, plus I had everything. I did a panel on everybody that was there because it was totally amazing. There we are filming him, but what was happening, anyway, there's the end of separation. It says, through the vocal communication, the beings are saying this planet must come together soon, must come together. The end of separation, that's the message. And so here we are, we're filming him, and as we're filming him, you can see. We also took pictures of UFOs over Giant Rock. So I'm thinking, okay, well, you know, first of all, I always say, why am I doing this? This is like the old days. Well, I'm doing this because I have this feeling they're coming back. I just have this feeling that we're in the same spot we were in the 1950s and 60s. The history is repeating itself. So here are some of the visuals of that time. So we need to study George Adamski, okay? We need to go backwards because the answers are there. Here's George Adamski, flying saucers have landed. With Colonel Corsi, I met Desmond Leslie. You're going to see his picture. And I didn't understand who Adamski was because I wasn't very knowledgeable then, and hardly anybody knows anything about Adamski anymore. But Timothy Good, who's the best researcher in the world, sustains this story, and it's really interesting. On November 20th of 1953, Orthon, who was from Venus, actually stepped off a ship in Desert Center, Southern California, and gave George Adamski a message, and he was with 7 people. Here's some photos. First of all, there's the representation of Orthon. This book has just come out. It's by Michel Zinger. It's called We Are Here, Visitors Without Passports. He is French. The people that are doing this, Timothy Good, Zinger, they're not American. They're foreign people who are doing this research. The other one is Gerard Arston from the Netherlands on the Space Brother movement. In this book, We Are Here, Visitors Without Passports, they show Adamski there with his major telescope. They show the plaster cast of Orthon's shoes taken by George Hunt Williamson. George Hunt Williamson was a researcher back then. He and his wife were there with the other people, and they saw the ship, and you'll see it in a minute. By the way, the person who knows the most about George Adamski is Glenn Steckling, who was 9 years old when Adamski died, but Adamski was entrusted to his father, Fred Steckling. So I've talked to Steckling at length about Adamski, and he'd said, well, you know, Paula, what you don't understand is those beings used to sit in the car with Adamski when he lectured in Germany. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, they were dressed like blonde young men. They'd come to the hotel, they'd get in the car. I said, the ETs? They were ET? He said, yes. Then he showed me a Polaroid of Adamski lecturing, and he said, one of these guys in this Polaroid, and I saw the people there, is an ET. Can you pick him out? And I did. I said, it's a guy that's overdressed with the suit and tie everybody else didn't have. It's like, and he said, yes, and it looked like Tab Hunter, that movie star. So for some reason, the facial features are amazing. That, by the way, take a good look at him, was RAF pilot Desmond Leslie, who wrote the books on Adamski. Here I am interviewing Glenn Steckling. Here is the photo from that book, We Are Here, Visitors Without Passports, of Orthon. I don't have a pointer, but he's in that photo. They were able to enlarge in that photo that was taken to actually find him in the photo. Well, they have his feet. They have the plaster cast of his feet. What else do you want? Everybody, you know, and 7 witnesses. And nobody talks about George Adamski? This, you know, and here's the Adamski photographs. And I want you to notice these because there were movies done during this time too, films. Here's the spot in Desert Center where Orthon actually put his feet down and where the casts were taken. And a friend of mine that's working with me just got in a car. He lives up in Irvine and drove right down to that spot Like I'm going to go tomorrow to where Angelucci went under the Halpernian Bridge and went to see what was going on. Here's some more George Adamski photos. This story needs to be covered. It really does. Also, what happened, Orthon asked him for a glass plate, because in those days when you're taking the photographs, they used a glass plate, and he put on a language that's very much like a Brazilian language. You see the glass plate that Orthon returned to Adamski, and there's a plaster cast of the shoes. Talk about physical evidence, there they all are, taking the plaster casts of the shoes of this guy that gets off a craft. And the message is very important. The message is this, and I just listened to an hour of Adamski giving a lecture in Europe, very, very logical man. If you want to go still on, if you want to hear it from the horse's mouth, go on internet and get George Adamski's lectures. Around 1952, we had a choice in the timeline. You'll see it in the timeline I've given. We could go to a space economy because Eisenhower had signed the papers for NASA and Kennedy was going to promote it. Adamski knew Kennedy. Adamski's buried in Arlington National Cemetery. He said we could go to a space economy and the spin-offs would provide our planet with economic growth and we would get to meet our cosmic brothers and sisters, or we could continue in the steps of economy we have, a war economy, but the problem is we would have to create the wars. That's what happened in 1953. Now guess which economy we picked? Adamski went to see Pope John XXIII, who waited for him because Pope John XXIII had an encounter with a human-type alien at Castel Gandolfo. When Adamski walked in, John XXIII was dying, but he talked to him and gave him a coin, which Glenn Steckling has. He went to see Prince, I think, Juliana of the Netherlands. He went to see the Queen of England because he was massively giving them this opportunity. In the lecture that I just heard, and we have his lectures, he said, look, every government he approached already knew about UFOs, especially India. They already knew about the context, they already knew about the people, they already knew about the message. Why are we still in the dark ages? Why are we still not out there meeting our cosmic brothers and sisters? What has stopped this? It's really interesting because that's why these people came. They didn't come just to have coffee with George Adamski. You know, here is Desmond Leslie. I said, remember what he looked like, because he's behind me here and I didn't really know who he was. This is the worst part. There's Colin Andrews, there's Desmond Leslie, there I am in the beginning. Desmond's holding up the Adamski book. But as we're sitting there all together with Colonel Corso, because this is 1998, he's talking about Adamski, and I'm thinking, who is this Adamski guy, you know? And Colonel Corso is talking to him, and they were going to write a book together, and so I heard Desmond Leslie, remember he's an RAF pilot, he said, you know, Adamski didn't have an umbilical cord. He had this big starburst in the where his umbilical cord was. And I have talked to Glenn Steckling and others who verify that. In other words, some of these contactees, I think, are involved with the actual races of these people. There's Adamski shaking hands with people I know in Italy. I know that guy that he's shaking hands with. He's the owner of a restaurant called the Zodiac in Rome. You know, so I didn't have a background back then. By the way, this is important for you. This is the handshake from the Venusians. This is the greeting they use. And this comes from the Adamski Association. Here he is with Council of Pedago. Here we all are with Desmond Leslie when Colonel Corso came. By the way, that we were just talking about this. The man on the extreme left is Bill Hamilton. We were just talking about that he was one of the researchers who was there. Here he is with Colonel Corso. Who was there? That was Desmond Leslie, the one who wrote the books on Adamski. So I end up in Bogota, Colombia, and I'm talking about this. I'm talking about Space Brothers, and Jaime Rodriguez comes up to me and he goes, well, he said, I have a story for you. And I said, what is it? And he said, well, in 1977, a man who said he was a star man who was commander of a ship walked into the Ecuadorian embassy in Peru He said, come on outside, I'll show you my ship. These people are all alive. The secretary, the representative of Ecuador, they're all alive. Roberto Avila, they're all alive. The person said, my name is Vanju. Here I am talking to Jaime Rodriguez about this. He said, my name is Vanju, and the first thing they said to him was, we can kill you. Welcome to Earth. We can kill you. And he goes, no. He said, and he takes this thing from around his neck. It's a cube, and it's like a six-sided cube. And he says, no, this is the monitor I have. They're watching me from the ship. You can't do anything. He says, the reason why I'm here, he said, you have a mountain. He said, Huascaran was the mountain. He said, you're going to have an earthquake, and 45,000 people are going to die if you don't move those people out of that village, because the top of Huascaran is going to come right over and kill them all. And you know what they asked him? How many tanks are over in the country next to us? How many military do they have? They asked him those questions. Do you think they moved the people from the village? Did that happen? Yes. Did 45,000 people die? Yes. Were we warned by Vanju? Yes. And I said, you mean you people didn't even listen? No, because they just didn't listen, because they just couldn't believe that anybody could see the future, that they would know the future. In any case, there's Vanju, there's Val Thor. This has happened historically all over. And here I am with Antonio Urzi, and Paul knows Antonio Urzi. This is the Urzi footage. By the way, these are not movies. Antonio Urzi, who took these pictures, these are not magnets thrown up in the air. These are full-length movies. Antonio Urzi lives in Milano. He films from the top of his attic to this day, if you befriend him on Facebook. His wife, I think, is a contactee. I'm going to go backwards so you can see her eyes. That's his wife with Jaime Maussan. Jaime is covering this story for years. I've known Antonio Urzi for 20 years. He's been filming UFOs. And I think it's on your right-hand side is his footage. But what's interesting for me, that's his footage from movies, is that this looks like the Adamski craft to me. A lot of it. So I'm going, okay, so who's in that? Here's Milano. It's Milan in Italy, and he's from the attic doing this. I'm going, okay, this craft looks really familiar. Are they coming back? Here's some more Urzi footage. And this is movies. These aren't, so it's silly to say Photoshop. Photoshop was not invented until 1992. So those people that go after Billy Meier, I don't know what they're going after. Here's the question here, are they returning? There's Urzi footage with the little thing coming out of there. This is all Urzi. They are not, I've been with Urzi in Mexico City. I said, Antonio, don't you leave this hotel without dragging me with you. I want to see UFO. And he pulls me into the street. We look into the sky. I don't see anything. He points to a corner of the sky. There's a white dot. It's coming towards us, and the Mexican television has filmed it. Don't ask me how that happens. Some people can do that. So there's Urzi footage. Okay, the messages of the 50s and 60s were also given to contactees in Italy, and I'm going to run through the contactees in Italy because I want to get to South America. Okay, fire in the sky, and remember, Travis Walton saw 2 human-type beings also. I did the Charles Hall story. It took me 2 years. Weatherman, area in Indian Springs facility. I flew him there. I did the whole story of the tall whites with him. The Millennial Hospitality series, filmed him there. He's telling the truth. He is military. He wanted to be an intelligence guy. He passed a test, 100% for logic, and of course they're going to put him there because he didn't freak out like everybody else. This is an important story to follow, the Charles Hall case. There I am with Charles Hall. Every time I do these stories, very, very quickly, I have to drag a guy with me because I'm afraid that it's so dangerous. I don't want to do it alone. And who did this with me was airline pilot David Coote from New Zealand, Frontier Airlines captain. So these are really serious stories. Michael Wolf Cruvan, I was the only journalist that went to Hartford, Connecticut 3 times, met him. He's got the same story as Emery Smith that you know, who's going to be at my conference. Emery Smith, who worked in Kirkland Air Force Base in the labs under Kirkland. Same story as Michael Wolf, has all these degrees, earned them in a really weird way, but on the cover of Catchers of Heaven is Sarah. Can he mix in with us? Yes, he's from Altair 4. And this is the picture of Sarah, human type alien, blue eyes, blonde hair. Wendell Stevens, the greatest researcher ever. I had to meet with him because I knew I was going to Billy Meier. I had to go there. I would live there. I live in Europe. For me to go to Billy Meier's one-day ride by car. So I went to Schmidt-Rudy. I knew the Meier story. It's a long story what happened when I was there. This is Guido Mosbrugger, who's no longer alive, who wrote the book And Still They Fly, who is the most valuable resource. He's a skeptical medical doctor who did the Billy Meier case. And I talked to him. Did I see Billy? Yes, but they wouldn't let me talk to him. The Billy Meier case, here I am with Wendell Stevens, who did the Billy Meier case and told me not only did Billy Meier's footprints disappear in the snow when he left the chalet in Switzerland, he said he saw the future, including the assassination of one of the popes on television, and Wendell was there. So they see the future, they know the future. And I believe Wendell, of course, Colonel Wendell Stevens, he did that whole case with Britt Elders and Lee Elders and told me the details. Now, here I am going to Switzerland to deal with the Billy Meier. What you don't understand, in my field, the craziest, stupidest arguments for this case I've ever heard, pictures are too clear. The pictures are too clear. There are too many pictures. These beings wanted to stage this in 1970s to raise consciousness. The books with the pictures in them are beautiful, and it was not photoshopped because Photoshop didn't come out until 1992. The Swiss government was not excited about the pilgrimages. Remember I tell you these contactees have people on their lawn, they have them coming from all over. They were not thrilled people would drive up there. So they tended to get mixed up and try to debunk it. But the story of Billy Meier with the Pleiadians is real. And here's a picture that I got from a scientist in Florence on the bottom here that dealt with the Billy Meier case because NASA was extremely interested. They knew it was real. And let's go to Eugenio Siracusa. Eugenio Siracusa on the island of Sicily, 1950s. While all this is going on in Southern California, we have Eugenio Siracusa. He meets with these beings who dress in one-piece blue suits, and they come to see him. He calls them Ashtar. There's Eugenio. He did the same thing Adamski did. He went all around the world with the message to stop using nuclear, or we're going to do ourselves in. He became an ambassador for them. And I thought, oh, there he is, one people, one family, the end of separation. Human species is one family. Go back to Star Trek. You know, and that's what their message was. There he is. Now, the followers of Eugenio Siracusa are very interesting. They were Giorgio Bongiovanni, that you see with the stigma, and Maurizio Cavallo was one of them, the one that you saw the little girl picture. What is President Eisenhower doing writing to Eugenio Siracusa? This is a letter from President Eisenhower to Eugenio Siracusa. Mrs. Eisenhower and I are very aware of what in other words, there's 4 of these letters. I was able to get one of what the story is. We are trying our very best. By the way, Eisenhower was into it up to here. He knew about the contactees. He had met with the beings. He knew everything. He just couldn't do anything about it because remember, we went the way of war. We did not go the way of space. So it was already in the military-industrial complex. If you hear the testimony of Emery Smith, and please go to hear it or come to Laughlin to hear him, he said, this is in the hands of the multi-global corporations, not the government, not the military, but the people that are making the money off this. And it's global corporations. He said even when he worked at Kirkland, he said some of the floors were rented by multi-global corporations that were doing the research, including alien tissue. Can you imagine what you could do with that with pharmaceuticals? You know, it's much more complicated than you believe it is. It is not black and white, and we are not going to have disclosure. This is money. This is economy. So going back to, I'm throwing my thoughts in here because those are my conclusions, but I didn't understand how come, you know, Eisenhower was writing to him. Of course, he's aware of everything else. Then this is a whole other story. Some of you, how many have ever heard of Beyond the Light Barrier, Elizabeth Clare's story in South Africa? Why aren't we talking about that? This is a real story. She was awarded by the British government. She had a relationship with an extraterrestrial. And she even had a child by him. And then she brings back ferns and artifacts from outer space. These are her photos. Michael Hessman said they were the best photos ever taken of UFOs. These are her photos. South Africa, she's awarded by the British government. There she is with the statue of the man she met. And if you read Beyond the Light Barrier, there's a picture of the ring he gave her plus the ferns in their houses, because he took her to his planet. And that's not even, it's not an American story. See, this is the problem. More international stuff needs to be inserted in here, because this all comes together. Maurizio Cavallo, really fast, because I know that I'm overloading you with too much stuff. But any Polaroid pictures, there he is, Maurizio Cavallo. I went to see him, I told you 3 times, he lives in Vercelli, right there. He's an artist, so look at his paintings. Look at his eyes. He was a follower of Eugenio Siracusa. He was a young boy. He said to me, Paula, he's the one that told me that you could see the Polaroids now because Sewell said that this journalist was going to come 10 years from now. He said all that stuff. Then he said, he said, when I was with Eugenio and we were on the island of Sicily, those people used to walk in between the rooms of the houses. I could tell them when they walked from one room to another, just like Steckling said that the beings used to be with Adamski in the car. Wrap your mind around that. He said, I saw them there. Okay, so there's a Maurizio Cavallo picture up on the right. And there's another picture of a being, and I'm not sure who that is. That could be the Grand-Bethune woman that he said he had a contact with. This is Sewell. This is Sewell. This is what he looks like, and here he is coming out of the ship. Now, this is a story that I was all alone in doing until I called Jaime Maussan, who flew all by himself to Vercelli with me to do the filming. He said, because we had these Polaroids, you can't mess with a Polaroid. I mean, you can with other photos, but not a Polaroid. And we not only had this, we had the audio of Sewell while Maurizio was in the house. The tape recorder went down, and Sewell was talking to him. I have it right now. I have that audio of his talking in Italian. Here's some of the beings. They're very strange. So who gets involved with this? Who gets involved with Billy Meier since we debunk our own people? Our own community of ufologists debunks our own people. We don't need the outside people. I remember Colonel Corso said, we just sit and laugh and watch you people criticize and fight among each other because we don't have to do anything. This is the truth. Colonel Corso was debunked by one of the greatest researchers ever, if you read the intro. 2 of the greatest. And I remember when Corso said to me, he said, who are these people? He says, did they have high-level clearances? I said, no, Colonel, I think they're just jealous because you wrote a book. I said, they don't have any clearances. But anyway, who buys this stuff is the Japanese, because they bought all Maurizio Cavallo's stuff and they bought all Billy Meier's stuff, including pieces of craft. Japanese came in, bought all the movies. I saw the movies that Billy Meier has with the craft over the highway and the cars going under it. Cars are just going, the craft is over the highway. I don't know, were you using a fishing rod or something? And the Japanese are interested. They don't say it, I mean, they don't talk about it, but they're very interested. You're telling me that that's a picture of a gold digger and Dean Martin's? So Billy Meier is watching Dean Martin's show, right, which he can't watch. He's in Switzerland. He hardly speaks English. And he picks one gold digger And that is what they say about the picture of Asket. That is a photograph of a being Pleiadian. Her name is Asket. And if you go everywhere and ask oh no, that's a gold digger from the Dean Martin show. You know, the logic of that is so stupid. Because first of all, they're not watching the Dean Martin show in Switzerland. And he's not going to pick one dancer. The excuses we use are ridiculous. That's the middle picture, the black and white. The other one is Maurizio Cavallo picture. That is one of the beings on the ship. She does look a little like Jill because they do look like that. The women are very refined features. So Amicizia case, really fast. I could do a whole entire conference on this. When I was in Italy, I found out that in 1953 on the Adriatic coast, and I found this out because I had his book translated in English from Stefano Brescia, a group of beings called, they call them W56s because it was 1956. This is a big story. This is the biggest story in ufology. They made a deal with 10 Italians, and they said, we're going to live among you, and the man that sponsored them, Bruno Samaciccia, put them in Rocca Pia, which is a castle in Abruzzo, which is near Pescara, these beings. And they said to the 10 Italians, we can stay with you, but we're going to stay and see if we can, this is called the friendship case, if we can have friendship. But the minute you start fighting among yourselves, we have to leave. He says, the W56 has said, we have a technology, it's called Ureda. Ureda means harmony. The minute, if we can keep harmony among you and us, we will stay here. And the book is amazing because I went to interview then the people that are still alive. And they would tell me that they would sponsor these big trucks full of, most of these beings are vegetarian, okay? In Howard Menger's book, it's all fruits and vegetables. In the friendship case, they'd have to truck in these vegetables. And they told me, and fruits. And they would bring in the truck because they buy them for the beings who are staying in the castle. And they told me that when they take the driver to the cafe to buy him a coffee, the truck was empty and the guy was shocked and it was teleported out of there to them. This went on for about 10 years before it just disintegrated the whole relationship because the Italians started to fight among themselves. And the way they would do it is they'd say, oh, you saw them yesterday? Oh, you spoke to them? Why didn't you tell me? It was that kind of thing. The relationships just fell apart. So the W56s had to leave. I want to show you what is left of that. First of all, Michael Sala is the only one that brought Stefano Brescia to this country. I have all the audio tapes. He left me the audio tapes of the beings, the aliens speaking in Italian. Just remember Robert Short? They spoke with crystal radios. They would be in the castle, they used the crystal radio. And I have the audio tapes of the beings speaking in really weird Italian. And one of the beings, and some were very tall and some was very short. And Pescara had all kinds of problems with ships like this coming out of the water. The fishermen wouldn't go fishing. It's in all the newspapers in Italy that we had the problems. And who's alive is 92-year-old Gaspare Di Lama that was part of that group. And I'm interviewing Piero Di Girolamo, who's part of that group. And there's Gaspare Di Lama. I went to his house last year on Lake Como. He's 92 years old and explained to me that these beings wanted to model a spirituality of unity. Remember I told you that they called it technology, that Ureda, and tried to do it with a small group. Now the friendship case in Italy is very much like the friendship case in Chile, because these beings have been coming down here, they're human type people, and trying to see if they could live among us and where we know about it, you know? So there's Gaspare very, very young, and there's a photo that Gaspare took, but Gaspare also told me, there I am walking with him in Lake Como last year. And the beings, actually, that's one of them. His name is Kenyo. He's 10 foot tall. He, they're no different from we are. But then, I talked to Monsignor Balducci, and he says, Paula, for God's sakes, you think God just created people on this planet? It isn't even logical. He created people all over the place. They're just on different levels. And the ones that are more advanced hope we make it. And there's some that are less advanced. And the Kenyo is one of the W56s. And they measured how tall he is, and he was 9 feet tall. But I also have the audio in Italian of Kenyo speaking. There's Pescara. There's this message. Sigir, who was one of the W56s, said, and it's really interesting because I'm trying to collect these messages. You must remain united, the end of separation, the same as Bob Short, you know, and understand your weaknesses to evolve as humanity and as our close friends to be more compassionate. This is what they were telling them. And because he's reading it to me, and I'm, you know, I got it on a movie because I'm trying to movie it all. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Anyway, so I'm going to Latin America. Let's take a deep breath because this is the powerful part. So I figured, okay, so, you know, they didn't listen to us in the 50s because all we care about, I've listened to every military man who has said, you know, who has left a dying declaration, we want the propulsion system. We want to know how the ship works. Let's take the ship. Nobody cares what's inside, who it is, or what they're doing. In fact, they can't. Because if you knew there was one of them sitting here, and you might take them to Starbucks, that would be very dangerous for the powers that be. As long as you believe they're little gray extraterrestrials that scare the living daylight out of you, everybody's okay. And that is the brainwashing of our field. John Mack told me the abduction or the genetic material stuff had stopped in 1994. So what in the world are we still on that for? Nobody is covering the Space Brothers. Nobody. And this is incredible because it is dangerous to believe they could be like us. It is dangerous to believe we have friends in high places. And this actually, I told you all over the world, but wait until you hear Latin America. So I started thinking, well, they left because, you know, we were so interested in technology, we just take their ship and forget about them, or we kill them, or we do something, you know. And I had a very great conversation with Paul Davis today about the day the Earth stood still and what Robert Wise knew about the day the Earth stood still. The message at the end, if you go on my YouTube, you'll see Robert Short said that Michael Rennie actually ad-libbed that message from Klaatu. How could that happen? There was no script for that. You know, you humans, you better get your act together, otherwise we don't want you with us. That very end, that's amazing. That message, I read it to all my students. But, you know, so what's happening here? It is a very important part of history. So I said, okay, you know, we ignored them. They left. They said, what the heck, we're not going to stay here with these people that are technology-minded. We're going to South America. Because the only connection you can have with a being is a heart connection. You're going to be intellectual like him? You're going to have an intellectual, logical connection with somebody that can go through a wall and do all kinds of amazing things, that has a knowledge that you can't even go near? You can only have a heart connection. He's alive, you're alive. That's consciousness connection. So I said, where are they going to do that? They're going to do that in a place where, in Latin America, where, you know, if somebody from a field in Latin America sees the Apunians come up, they're not going to say, how does your craft work? What is the propulsion system? They're going to say, come in, we'll give you a cup of coffee. Or in the case of the Apunians that were near Peru, what they did is heal the people of the villages. So then I had to go and say, well, where do I go? Where do I learn? And so I began to do some research on the case of Sisto Paz Wells. The heart connection is the only connection I feel we can have with ETs. We're all part of consciousness. We're all one. And the thing is, so when I realized that Latin America probably had the biggest hearts, not even Italy. That experiment didn't go, remember? Because there were cardinals involved with the Italian experiment too. The Vatican was very involved with that experiment. If you really study the Amicizia case, all kinds of stuff happened there during the 50s. So here we go. Here you see Sisto Paz Wells, Ricardo Gonzalez, and Luis Fernando Mostacio from Brazil, who has contacts at Lake Titicaca. I started to interview them all, And I started with the godfather of all of them, just like Eugenia Siracusa. His name was Sisto Paz Wells. And in 1970, Sisto Paz began doing heavy meditation like silva mind control and everything. And all at once he started automatic writing, and he got this message to go out into the Chilca Desert at a certain time, because these Latin Americans, by the way, have the exact time these people are coming. They have the exact time, so when they go out there, they know they're coming at that hour. And so Sisto Paz and his brother Charlie, who you see up there, meet with a guy named Oxal. Oxal from the moon of Ganymede, one of the moons of Ganymede. And now Charlie has transgendered into Veronica, and she lives up in Canada. And here I am talking to Charlie, who's Veronica, because I drove 1,300 miles to Canada to verify Sisto's story. Sisto's story of the young guys, and there they all are in the desert, meeting these space people. The ship lands, the guy says, and here's what Charlie told me, Veronica, come in. And he goes, yeah, we went and we touched the side of the ship, we went in, and these people started talking to us. Always the same message, heavily ecological. You're not taking care of the planet. You people need to change the way you do things, become more spiritual with your technology and so forth. So I'm verifying these guys' stories because I'm going there in person. And by the way, Ricardo Gonzalez will be one of the people in Laughlin. So anyway, I told you about this is how they did it. They'd go out to the Chilca Desert, they would camp, they knew when the craft was coming, they would fast and they would say Om mantras for a long time. The craft would land, and it would be a mass communication. Here's Luis Mostacio. The way he has his communication, he's taken under Lake Titicaca and he talks with the Great White Brotherhood. Here's a picture of Luis Fernando Mostacio with the UFO. There's another UFO everywhere he goes. What's interesting is they create the beings that come to see them. They're Apunians. They're from different planets. I said Oxal was from the moon of Ganymede. What's interesting is these spacemen, let me just call them spacemen, and they create this atmosphere called a Zendra. And you probably heard about it if you've been watching Grant Cameron's videos. An atmosphere called a Zendra, where it's a common atmosphere between you and them, and you can walk in and they can communicate with you, and they do communicate messages. And, they could call it a portal. One of the people that was a follower of Sisto Paz was Enrique Villanueva, who lives in California. You may have heard of him. He was at my conference. He had communication and sighting and visual communication with them in Shasta. So Shasta is going to enter into this. Ricardo Gonzalez every year goes to Shasta. It's all in Spanish. Ricardo is all in Spanish, so it's very difficult because I've been with him in his retreats. Here I am talking to Ricardo. Ricardo explained to me that when he was 21 years old, he was a follower of Sisto Paz Wells, but he was a pharmaceutical representative, and what happened was that he was told to go to the roof of his house with his family, and he saw the UFO just fly over, and then after that, he met the being that talked to him. I only have one of Ricardo's books, and he realized these beings came from the planet Apu in the constellation of about 4 light years away in Alpha Centauri, and he said they're human. He said this guy was human. He's just a little tall. He was 10 foot tall, and he saw them and he communicated with them, and he met them in Shasta. So I don't know what to say about Shasta because Shasta is a mystery, and so my story of Shasta is this. And this is very quickly, and this is all true. I'm telling you, it's all true. When I was doing this research, Ricardo is very, very devoted to Nicholas Roerich, who is the artist who painted the first piece. Remember, this is peace, come together, peace, one unified. He said, Paola, I'm in Mongolia, where Nicholas Roerich was. He was a Russian painter who painted the first peace flag for the League of Nations, the white flag with 3 red dots. He said, Antarel, the being that I am in contact with wants you in Shasta. And I said, I don't do those kinds of things. I just want to do the story. I'm not interested in any of this. I thought he wanted publicity. I thought, no, I don't camp. I'm not doing this. And he said, okay. Then he texted me from Malaga in Spain and said, no, Paula, Antarel definitely wants you in Shasta. If you could possibly, we'll arrange everything. We'll give you the tent. I didn't know they were fasting, so I brought one apple and cut it in 16 pieces and ate that for 3 days. Because that's not my style. I was like, the whole time I was there, I was going, when do we eat? You people aren't eating. So I met them there in Shasta. I was, Friday and Saturday were wonderful. I had an interpreter. Actually, my interpreter was the girl with the pink on her head. She was Italian, and she talked to me in Italian the whole time. I didn't realize, because I didn't understand, that at 8:30, if a UFO flew over our heads, it meant Antarel was going to be in the forest. So I'm sitting there, because I've been with Stephen Greer, I've been with everybody, I've seen UFOs. I'm just sitting there going, oh, isn't this nice? The UFO's flying over our heads, and I'm seeing it on night screening. Going, this is nice, now we can go home. I'm freezing to death here, and I'm starving. Those were my thoughts on Sunday. Those were my thoughts. And I thought, it's almost over. It's like, because it was great. I mean, we did mantras and everything, but I'm not a camper. And so, especially in a tent, freezing to death. So Ricardo comes over to me and he says, Paula, did you see the sighting? I said, yeah, it was great. It flew over our heads. And he said, Antarel is in the forest right now. Can you handle it? And I had one split second to decide. He said, I can't go. He said, but I'm sending you with 2 other women who speak Spanish. They were Spanish women. He said, you hold hands and you go down there until the Zendra comes. The Zendra is that field that I told you about. And he goes, and he showed it to me. He says, see that tree? This mist is going to come out of the ground. You stand right there and don't move, but you let go of the woman's hands. He said, there are 2 other people down there. And he said, he's standing against a tree. And I thought, oh, it was dark. We couldn't use flashlights. I tripped all the way down there. I stood in that. I saw the mist come up. I can honestly tell you there was a white mist. And the scariest part was letting go of Mercedes' hand, because as long as I was grabbing onto somebody, I didn't care. It's like if I can grab onto this person, it isn't easy to have contact. So I get down there. I'm looking, and I see straight in front of me a guy, 10 foot tall, standing against a tree. See the tree in the picture there. He's standing right, because I did this with Grant Cameron. It's on his, because he took me down there to relive this. And he's got a hoodie. The guy has a hoodie on. He's got a long face, and he has a gym suit on, what I thought was a gym suit. And he's standing against a tree talking to me in a language that I cannot understand at all. And I'm going, this isn't Spanish. What is this? And he sounded like a bullhorn. It was not in my head. It was echoing through the trees. The other 2 ladies didn't hear it. And I'm hearing it, and I'm going, wonder what he's saying. And it's like, and I didn't know what to do. And I just stood in front of him, and I said, the only thing I could say to him, I respect you, Antarel. Mentally, I said that. I didn't talk because I was in shock. But at the end of about 2 minutes of this strange language that I didn't understand, he said like a robot, thank you, turned around and walked back into the forest. This really happened. I was in shock. He walked back in, everybody turned around. There was 1, 2 in front of me, and I was 2 beside me. We all saw him. I'm the only one that heard any of that. And then when we went back to Ricardo, I said, I think he said, thank you. And he turns around and he says, you were invited. And then I remembered Close Encounters. And that was the movie that started my whole career. Remember when Francois Truffaut said, let them through, they're invited, let them through, they were invited. And it was so strange. It was like the finish, the 360 of my whole career. And so what happened was, there's a place that happened in Shasta. It's in Sand Flats. And here's the gang. Here we all are. What I didn't realize that 1 week earlier, they drew what would happen because Ricardo has around him psychics that he calls antennas to verify the message, and they've even got me standing where I really stood. How did they know I was going to say yes? And how did they know I was going to stand in that spot? This is 1 week before. They showed it to me afterwards. They said, we knew you were going to be there and you would say yes. And that's what he looked like. And that is, so I started following Ricardo's story because he travels a lot. Right now he's in Jerusalem with his wife. He's traveling around the world for a peace mission. This is about peace. This is about the end of separation. All the messages we've been getting has come together. Otherwise, it's over. And here we are. There's Ricardo. He will be at my conference in Laughlin this year, and he will talk about the latest messages he's getting. I went to Chile with him. This is Argentina. I also went to Argentina. These are all people that camped out there with their, this is amazing. This is 3 days of meditation for world peace. You could see the Reusch flag. They all brought their kids. They were all in tents. They all shared food. Nobody smoked anything, and when they picked up to leave, there wasn't one piece of paper on the ground. And I go, this would never happen here. Because they all had this focus on world peace, let's meditate. This is Argentina, and they all had different flags from Uruguay, Paraguay, and I spoke about this experience. And of course, you know, anymore, there's no flight path over Capilla del Monte in Cordova, so there's UFOs right there watching us. I'm walking around in Chile. Here's Chile. This is a peace flag. This is why I follow this particular person, because it's about world peace. It's about meditation. It's about sending energy to Syria and all these countries. Here we are in Shasta, Monte Perdido in Spain last year. This is Alicia Rodriguez of the Reusch Society. You know, there's a Reusch Museum in New York City. He painted 600 paintings. He was a Russian mystic who lived in India. Here we are in Spain. Here's Ricardo talking about this. The reason why I am getting involved in this, of course, there's one picture I want you to see. I'm freezing to death. I hate doing this kind of thing in the middle of the night. This is not my thing. But I realize, and he's laughing at me because I'm with all these people. I realize, yes, I can do the journalism. Yes, I can give you the message. But if I don't do something, I'm being a hypocrite. You must be the change that you want. And it's really hard because this is not my thing. But I will go, if this makes a difference in the world and changes the path of where we're going, I'll do it. It's not, you know, as I said, it's not my thing. Here I am with Stephen Greer doing the same thing. This is Ivica, who said, and I'm trying to wrap my mind around this. She said, look, Ricardo, she was on the ship. She is regular size. She said, I am from your future. She says, I am from your family in the future. She said, something is going to happen on down the line, and if you don't change the timeline, we're in trouble. And she has told him that and she's physical, has told him that in Chile. And he said to her, as a journalist, I said, my first question is, then you won't exist if we change the timeline. Because what she said was they had to take the kids off the planet and bring them to Apu because they're genetically similar to us. So they said they took them off the planet in a place called Alma in Chile. And Ricardo went to Alma, and there's radio telescopes there from all over the world, from China, from Italy, from America, from Japan, on this place in Chile. So somebody knows the truth. So we have to change the timeline. So, because these people, whether you like to believe it or not, are time travelers, and they've even said it. They know what the future is. This is our field, so we don't go anywhere but this. This is where you go. This is what you do. This is what's going on. This is the party, hardy. This is it. This is the Roswell Festival. But I mean, the thing is this, that I see this everywhere. I see this. You walk into a conference, and when we got these serious issues going on, geopolitical and so forth, and this is where we are. And I'm thinking, what, you know, what are these people up there thinking we are? I mean, if they're watching this, they're going, these humans. But these are the real ones. You know, let's not insult the cosmic cultures who are coming here to warn us of earthquakes, you know, like Huascaran and so forth. This man will bring us into outer space. I'm really curious where he's at with all this. I'm convinced that the corporate space travel is going to be interesting. The bottom line for me, and this is why I've put my heart, soul, body, energy into a different kind of conference, is consciousness. If we can, all my colleagues that are involved in consciousness, and that's Grant Cameron and Colin Andrews, and a lot of other people that are talking about consciousness have graduated, are really going to the bottom line of what this is all about. This is the history of planet Earth. It is not ufology. These things really did happen. And we are all children of the cosmos. So why research UFOs? For us, we're the children of Earth. We need to know this. And we must embrace the challenge for us and future generations, because it's very important that they take this seriously. And this is the conference again, and I have 6 international speakers. And hopefully we'll have a dialogue and talk about the Native American original creation stories also. So I thank you very much, because I know I've overloaded you, but may I encourage you to take one of these sheets and read at least 2 of these books, because they're really not fiction. They happened in this area of California, and know that we have just buried this truth. So thank you very much.